Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with
Cam Banks, Creative Director of Cortex at Fandom Tabletop.
And so last year around this time, we were talking about Tales of Xadia, based on the Dragon Prince Netflix cartoon series, which is a fantastic series if you haven't watched that yet. And it was still though in the early stages. So we sort of talked about like what you hope to plan to have in there. But now it's coming out at the end of March. Am I correct? Of 2022.
Yeah, and about end of March 29th is the date that we have for the big digital launch on talesofxadia.com. The printed book is going to be sent out around that time to the people who pre-ordered it, and should soon after that hit distributors, which means it'll get into retail stores and places where you can order it from that point.
Okay. So how big is the book now? What's the final page count?
I think it's something like 304 pages. It's a little bit bigger than the Cortex Prime game handbook, which it's quite a shocker for me since Cortex Prime has like all the rules in it, and this only has one version. But no, it's bigger because of a great deal of lore, and we went to sort of quite some extensive examples and things were placed in there and so forth. It's pretty full on.
Okay, and when you mentioned lore, if I remember correctly, last time you were using the I guess you could say the series Bible, stuff that people haven't seen yet. And is that still the only source of material of lore that you have for this new book?
Well, we have been able to work in collaboration with the show's writers and producers and the people who run things over there at Wonderstorm. That's the studio that makes the show. And there's nothing better than working with creators of a property. I mean, there are sometimes you have a license and you talk mostly to an intermediary or someone whose job it is to handle just accounts and so on. We've been able to talk to writers. We've been able to talk to the franchise manager. She's been amazing. And that means that when we come up with questions for something that they've never even thought of because it hasn't been appropriate for a show, it's some kind of lore that they're never going to mention or wasn't going to come up. We have their writers to tell us, oh, this is what it would be, or this is the name of that place, or so on. So that's been fantastic. So yeah, I think more than any kind of story Bible, we've just had the people who write the story Bible as our touch points for this game, and it's been phenomenal.
So what's exactly inside the book? What chapters are in there? How much of it deals with lore? How much of it deals with rules?
Okay, so there's 7 chapters and an appendix, which is also quite extensive. It's got a lot of reference sheets and bonus content on the end. The chapters, we've got 2 chapters at the beginning of the book, which are introductions. One's to the world of Xadia. If you don't know the show well enough, or you want to know more about it and you want to have a short summary of what the setting is about, we've got that. And there's an introduction to Cortex as a rule system for those folks who haven't played Cortex before, which, it's quite a lot of people. And those 2 serve as the introduction both to the property itself, the world, the setting, the characters, and also the rules. And after that, we go straight into a more in-depth gazetteer of Xadia. So that's where we have everything about the different human kingdoms and the elven kingdoms and dragons and magical creatures and so on. So we wanted to put that all at the front. Makes sense, right? So if you know kind of what the world's about, you get a little bit of a brief summary of rules, and then we go deep dive into the actual setting. Flipping after that, you'll have the largest part of the book, which is the player's guide. And this includes not only how to make your own original characters, which we highly recommend, a very extensive character creation system in here, walks you through the process of making a character with almost like asking questions about, where you're from, what do you do, what were your people like. And then at the end of that, you have a character. And there's a couple of variations of how that, like if you really want to make a character fast, you can go a quicker route and so on. But this chapter also includes all the rules for playing the game and advancing your characters and tracking how things go and so on. So it's quite large. kind of got bigger and bigger as I was writing it, just because I knew we wanted to include more content. And at that point, when we realized it had kind of hit its point where it was at its best, right? We then had to sort of tone down some of it so we didn't go too far into boring people with explanations for things. But that's what editors are for. We've got great editors. Right after that, there's something called the Mage's Guide, because we broke out a lot of the rules for magics into its own chapter, which means that not only do you know how magic will work in the Dragon Prince setting, you'll also have sort of an in-depth conversation in there about things like dark magic, which is, if you don't know the show, there are these primal sources of magic that sound like elements, the sun and the earth and the sky and so on. But humans can't use that by default. That's not something they can access. Only elves and dragons can. So humans have dark magic, which they use by taking things that have a magical essence and essentially destroying it, sacrificing it, or using it up to make their own spells work. So the whole chapter on how magic works and how to make magical characters. Then there's the Narrator's Guide, which is the equivalent of a Game Master section, quite in depth there. It talks about how to run the game, what your first session is going to be like, what scenes and sessions and so forth are all about. And something in depth in there, which I guess we'll talk a little bit later when you ask, you were going to sort of, we go into some more depth of what rules are different in this game from Cortex. There's a whole section on catalysts, which is something new for Tales of Xadia. It's a kind of NPC, a game moderated character, or GMC, that is sort of significant and that will grow in the game as the players interact with them. So there's a big section on that. And the final chapter is a sample adventure. It's the Tale of the Corrupted Core. We call them tales in this game, and this is the third one we've done. We actually had two that we posted on the website leading up to the release of this as playtesting sort of adventure content. We put two tales up. There was the Lost Oasis, which was the first playtest, and the Tale of the Gloaming Glade, which came after that, where we sort of sharpened a few of our sort of ideas on how to present this. So the Tale of the Corrupted Core, which is the last chapter, is quite extensive. It's a 3-act kind of story. Takes place in between season 3 and the upcoming season 4 of the show. And so that's a big deal for us, because the Wonderstorm said, well, would love for you to tackle this actual canon thing as part of a story content for your book. And so that's where a lot of the other new lore comes in. So we had the Gazetteer earlier in the book, and this whole adventure section has a ton of extra stuff too. That's it. That's my rambling about the chapters. I hope that all made sense.
Oh yes. For those that are familiar with the Cortex rule system, I mean, you mentioned that there's a new thing called Catalyst for NPCs. Is there any other new or other changes?
If you're familiar with Cortex Prime, one of the main core sort of like concepts in there is this idea of tests, which is when you try and beat a difficulty that's been rolled on dice, an opposing roll, but it's your character versus the environment, or your character versus a minor character that's not that important. And then a contest, which is you versus another player character, or perhaps a major game moderated character where the two of you are sort of on equal level. And the contest is more back and forth until one of you wins, and a test is a one-off roll to try and beat a roll. So those two, we do carry them over into this game. That's kind of a essential part of Cortex. But we added a third kind of core rule for this game, which is challenges. And a challenge is like a series of tests to try and whittle down a pool of dice that represents the challenge until those dice are gone. So it's a little bit like a crisis pool from Cortex Prime, a little bit like a Doom pool kind of thing, or an extended challenge kind of idea from other games. But it's a simple way of trying to address the problem of, I've got lots of characters in a group. Each one of the characters wants to do something to try and solve the problem. And rather than have them all make separate tests and track how many times you did it and do that kind of thing, we just have a single pool of dice that they all are working against. And so you all roll against that one by one in a kind of a turn order. So that's a challenge. And we're going to add that to the body of rules for Cortex Prime on our website eventually, which we call the Cortex Codex. That's going to come out at some point on our website, and challenges sort of occupy that realm of it's not a test, it's not a series of tests, it's kind of its own thing with its own specific rules to make playing that kind of action in the game a whole lot easier.
What can you tell us about the layout design and the art direction for this book?
So if you're familiar at all with Cortex Prime, you'll know that we still have, and we're very glad to have T.L. Collier, our art director and graphic designer, and they are incredibly good at marshalling together artists and laying books out and making it flow really nicely. We've already sort of shown a little bit of this sort of experimental sort of style that we're using for Tales of Xadia on our website. You can see a few of the bonus content there have been laid out in a certain way. Each time we do a play test, or every time we sort of expose something to the public, we get feedback, and we take that into account and try and, make things a little bit better and improve upon that. So this book is really polished. The difference between something like this, where we've got a TV show with its own characters and properties and things, versus like the Cortex Prime book, which was a generic, toolkit kind of book, is we want all the art and all the sort of presentation to really fit that series. And so we were able to get access to some of the concept artists for Tales of Xadia for Dragon Prince. And we got some incredible sort of works of art essentially from them. I mean, we just love it. The front cover by Dorothy Yang is a good example of something where we have someone who's worked on the show, and then we give them what we want, and they say, well, here's our take. And it just blows us all away. So full color throughout the book, gorgeous layout, exceptional sort of design that's based entirely on the show and how the show feels. And it all flows really well together.
If I may ask, and I know it's tough to choose between your children, but is there any parts of this book that you really enjoyed to either help make, or you just love how it came together?
I'm actually very fond of the character creation in this book because quite often in other games, either I don't have the option to do a lot of these character creation things because the license says you kind of don't, or I had someone else do most of the legwork on it because I was busy doing something else, and I just said, okay, here's the rules, now let's have rules to make characters and so on. I got to work with one of my colleagues, Melly Doucette, who is our community manager, and she and I kind of brainstormed a lot together on how to make this really kind of user-friendly. We wanted it to be something that people could just sort of have fun making characters, as opposed to kind of it being a chore or being confusing. And so the end result is so many tables and cool suggestions and step-by-step process, which makes the whole thing a lot of fun. And little Easter eggs too, just things where you think, oh, well, I'll put this in here and see if anyone notices it. So that's been really good. I think it's one of my favorite parts of the book is the character creation chapter. After that, though, I think really the work that Dan Telfer did on putting the lore and background together. Dan is the narrative lead who works for me at Fandom Tabletop, and his key area is working on story content. So he wrote the Tale of the Corrupted Core and the previous two tales, and he also wrote the Gazetteer of Xadia, and had to work very closely with the writers on the show to get those sorts of things figured out. So as someone who kind of oversaw that but wasn't directly writing it, that's one of my favorite parts, is seeing that come together, because it's really amazing seeing new content sort of presented to people who want to read it and get more into this world in a way that we think is easy to digest. Like, we kind of put it together in a way you're not going to be overwhelmed by it.
Oh, so let's talk about the game master section real fast. For what kind of tools exactly are there to help game masters help give the world the right tone and feel, so that it's not, you're not exactly playing like, doesn't feel like Harry Potter or D&D or anything like that.
Yeah. Early on, we try to figure out what were you've heard this before, these sort of the three pillars of of D&D, exploration and combat, and gosh, what's the other one? I forget now.
Combat. Oh, I know. Yeah, I've heard this many times too. Someone's going to comment about it below. But yeah,
something.
Yeah.
But I thought, like, what's this game about? And I'm like, it's not D&D. We're not using D&D to sort of tell this particular kind of story and make this game work. So what's at the heart of Dragon Prince and the Tale of Xadia game itself? So I settled on discovery, intrigue, and adventure as the three sort of areas that sort of really sort of show off this world and the reason why people want to play it. And in doing so, I sort of said, well, let's sort of frame each session as kind of like or each scene in each session as being a sort of flavor of those things combined, right? So you would have a discovery scene or an intrigue scene or a adventure scene, and your tale could be an adventure tale, a discovery tale, or an intrigue tale, but you'll have elements of them all kind of combined in one way or another at some point. So we kind of approach it from that point. If you're going to be telling a story in this world, think of it in those sorts of ways. How much of each of those things do you want to throw in there? Do you want to have a scene that's very heavily focused on intrigue? If that's the case, then there'll be lots of, say, contests back and forth with some of the key catalysts in the story, these major NPC characters who you kind of want to, push the story along with them and do plot stuff. It's not like social combat necessarily, but it's more like this is where we figure out what everyone's motives are. We impose our motives as players onto the story, and then the story kind of pushes back with its own ones, right? So that's intrigue. Adventure is pretty clearly just having something fun with, jumping around swords and spells and doing other fun things, which people are fairly familiar with in role-playing games. And discovery is exactly what it says. I'm revealing more about this world in a scene, discovering new magic or sort of secrets that you didn't know about, or people who have their own kinds of secrets. The whole difference between discovery and intrigue is interesting, because discovery is not necessarily about mystery so much as finding something more to know. So knowledge is a big deal. I'm rambling a little bit, but I kind of think that presenting that kind of information to you as a narrator says, here's what we think this game's about, and here are some specific words and frameworks and ideas that you can use to tell those stories, and then use the mechanics to sort of reinforce that.
Will this book have any, I don't know if additional material is the right word. I notice sometimes when a new book comes out, there'll be like special dice or special play mats or things like that. Is there anything like that Fandom's planning to do along with the book?
Well, what's special about the games we make at Fandom is that we are going to be launching this whole tool set that comes online for playing the game and enhancing your experience. So when you pre-order it or you buy it or you get it online from the website, then you'll also unlock this whole digital version of this. It's not just a PDF, which we will have. You can download a PDF and save it on your tablet or whatever. But this compendium is the entire book actually sort of designed as a full-featured set of tools that you can sort of move through and read in chapter by chapter, or you can find and search and do whatever you like, with links everywhere. And when you create characters, eventually what will happen, we haven't got a full-fledged character builder ready for launch, but we will have the sample characters already built for you to use with the tool set. You can pull your character up and you can click on the different things and build a dice pool out of it, and then roll the dice pool and do all of that stuff on the actual game on the site. So it's actually like just the same way that we built D&D Beyond to work with D&D 5th edition. We've built this one at the beginning of the entire game's launch to make it work so you can play the game online with friends, or you can use it around a table or do whatever. So that's one avenue that we're trying to approach it. The special feature essentially of Tales of Xadia is, we have this whole website. And it's not just, hey, I click a button to download a PDF, cool, that's it, goodbye. It's, we have more and more stuff planned. We have a series of rollouts expected to come out that build on it even more. So that's the plan.
Well, that's really awesome. I can imagine that could be a useful tool not only for younger audiences, but also anyone just new. It doesn't matter if you've been playing role playing game for 30 years. If having a tool like that just makes character building, among other things, just so much easier to create.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that, and I'll be honest, I think sometimes people try and learn a new system, and because they've already been familiar with another one, it's takes a bit of unlearning that, or some time trying it out to really get the hang of it. So we make it easier on new players by saying, well, just click this, drive this, move over here, click a button, it'll roll the dice for you, it'll tell you the best outcome you can have from that. And then once you're familiar with that kind of thing, you can do it yourself with your own dice in meat space, so to speak. It's not going to be hard for you to do it that way. But we've had people playtesting this and trying it out and going through and QA and really going to work on this and figuring out, have we done what we need to do to introduce new players to this game? And I think the outcome we've got that launches on the 29th is the beginning of that success. Yeah.
One last question, and I have to ask because every time I do a video like this, there's always comments like this. What is next? Do you see more books coming out in the future, or are you just going to hold and wait to see how successful this book will be? What are Fandom's plans for Tales of Xadia?
Well, we don't want to do one and done. We really don't. That's not really our sort of viewpoint. We also don't really think that an endless supplement trail is the best way of going through it either. So we want to put follow-up books out, follow-up products out, obviously build on the website, make the digital stuff better. But in terms of actual book content and more tales and more stories, yeah, absolutely. We've got stuff in the works right now that we're sort of working through. The kind of thing that we want to make sure that we get right before we talk about announcements or dates or anything else. But we tease about it in the game handbook for Tales of Xadia. We talk about what's coming up a little bit, but we'll have more things to announce at some point soon. But no, we're not sort of like doing this and then just dropping the ball and leaving. We have many irons in the fire in terms of other games as well, but we're not going to be doing just one book for Tales of Xadia.
Well, excellent. Cam, thank you for taking the time to talk to us again about this. I'm very excited that the book is completed and will be out very shortly. And to our viewers, I'm going to put in the link below so you can pre-order it as soon as possible. And yes, stay safe out there. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Bye.